Let's head back down to our feature match area for a little bit more from Grand Prix Copenhagen. Hello and welcome to this round 12 here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. We have two players each on 10 and 1 here. Leo Linares against Javier Dominguez of Spain. The little 10 next to his name denoting the fact that he is the 10th ranked player in the world. And you can see that we're just playing the starting elements of this a little bit faster than normal. Scrap Heap Scrounger coming down early doors for Linares here on the left of our screen. And Javier Dominguez, he's on blue-white control, so early doors just countering a Goblin Chain Whirler there, trying to make sure that he gets up to the stage of having lots of mana, because that's really where this control deck thrives.
Indeed, Tim. We're going to see Javier use a Disallow instead of a Syncopate to hopefully be able to double spell on this turn. However, did not manage to do that, and we can see Javier wants to use his counter spells before he uses removal on the creatures on the board, so he can make sure that he gets to use them this game in an effective manner and countering the things that he wants. All right.
So Syncopate there, dealing with Peel and Alar, one fewer creature in the graveyard for future Scrap Heap Scroungers and so on. And now Teferi is down, untapped 2 lands, so there's a potential here for him to be able to use the mana that he's saved to counter something. As things stand, though, looks like Teferi going down to just 1 point of loyalty here as attacks from Bomat Courier join the Goblin Chain Whirler already on the battlefield.
And the thing that Leo doesn't play anything here is just a huge boon for Javier. One could almost say that the game is over at this point, because this means that Leo doesn't have any additional pressure, and if he can't kill Jace this turn, Javier is just going to get such an advantage on mana and cards, and as we all know in Magic, mana and cards is not a bad combination if you want to win the game.
Yeah, ultimately, it's not about the quick starts for these blue-white control decks. They just want to finish very strong. And the late-game power of Teferi, not to be denied here. He's on just 2 loyalty, so in principle he's pressured. But if we see a Settle the Wreckage or similar, even though there are creatures on the battlefield right now, it won't necessarily mean that the Planeswalker's in any trouble.
All right, so we're going to see a Settle the Wreckage showing response to the Bomat Courier trigger, as we've seen many times before. Leo's going to sacrifice it in response to draw that extra card, but all the Javier really cares about here is protecting his Teferi as much as he can. For every turn he can protect his Teferi, his advantage is gradually going to increase. And that's why we see the decks of the blue-white control decks built in such a way to do just that, with tons of 2-mana interaction to work with the ability of Teferi, the untap ability of Teferi, rather. And I think Leo only drew a cycling land and then passed the turn after cycling it, so Javier's hand is just full of gas. He needs a few lands though, but once he finds them, it's going to be pretty easy for him to get there with Approach of the Second Sun that we can see in his hand here.
I like the fact that Approach of the Second Sun can close out games very quickly indeed once it's actually cast. Obviously getting up to the 7 mana and feeling safe enough to cast it can take a bit of time, but once you cast it, between Azcanta the Sunken Ruin and other card drawing effects, really does not take very long to find a second copy, or alternatively you could do it the way that Javier's doing, of just having a second copy in hand.
That works too. Yeah, Javier's going to be at 20 life, and unless that Leo can deal 20 damage this turn, the game is over.
Alright, so big attacks on Teferi, that's all well and good, but Teferi has done his work. The second copy of Approach to the Second Sun, that's enough to pick up the game. We were playing that one. It was kind of a brisk stroll back through recent events. We're now going to get a chance to go back to our match in much closer to it being absolutely live as we have kind of caught up with ourselves. So we're going to get a chance to see Game 2 here. Leo Linares, Javier Dominguez catching up. We skip the shuffling, we just get all the more magic.
Right, and remember, blue-white control is constructed in such a way that it doesn't run really any creatures pre-board, or at least most of the time it doesn't, and that gives it a huge advantage pre-board, because its opponent has so many dead cards, and the blue-white control deck has only, say, live cards in the matchup. So, but what we do see is a lot of these decks are very prepared post-board for the blue-white deck to have as much edge as it can, because usually it has to try to come back from being under, 1-0 deficit in the matchup, and it's going to be a lot rougher for Javier post-board.
Yeah, I mean, even just the addition of duress in the sideboard for these black-red decks, it just puts a little bit of an extra hurt on what Dominguez has going on.
Right.
You can see him already at 5 life here from some very persistent attacking from Scrap Heap Scroungers in the early stages of this game.
Indeed. What's important is also that not only do you take in duress into your deck, but you also replace your worst card in the deck with probably the best card, which is a huge upgrade, of course.
Yeah, the delta going into game 2 is spectacular. Leonarez here, yes, he's very short on lands, but he's dealt so much damage in the early stage of this game. If there hadn't been that Invoke the Divine, it would all have been over already for Javier Dominguez. As things stand, even with it, he needs to make the most of the mana advantage that he now has and try and turn a corner.
All right, so they will finally see the 4th land. We'll see whether it's too late or not. We're going to see a negate, I believe, on the Chandra, or are we going to set this low? I think Javier should negate this, and in the following turns he will have a torrential... I think what Javier is thinking about is whether he should disallow this or negate it. Because if it disallows this, the Gearhulk becomes a lot more powerful in his hand because it can counter pretty much everything.
As things stand, he let it resolve, and now he is ambushing a Soulscar Mage and using... What are we going to see here?
So what he wants to do here is he just wants to play the Gearhulk to block the Soulscar Mage and then attack the Chandra. But he's just thinking about whether he should flashback one of his spells in addition to this. Elects not to. He was thinking about whether it was worth 4 life to put a Scrappy Chandra on the other side of the battlefield.
He then got to attack down Chandra, dealing with Chandra that way, keeping a few extra cards in hand, and that does mean that he still has counter magic for this Rekindling Phoenix as and when it comes along here. So, for those of you that were watching the clock tick down at extra speed, we've now caught up with reality and are fully live, so we will get a chance to see the rest of this game play out at regular pace.
So Javier did something smart here. We responded with a cycling land instead of immediately countering the Rekindling Phoenix. Because Leo was tapping out, Javier had full information and he knew that there was not going to be any other spells cast unless Leo drew a land with a Bowmet Courier, which he doesn't really care about anyways at this point. So if you cycle first, you get more information about how to deal with the Rekindling Phoenix. Say that you draw an Essence Scatter, for example, you would much rather use that on the Rekindling Phoenix than the Disallow. So, smart play, good sequencing from Javier here, for sure.
Now, we've hit a stage in the game where, even though Javier Dominguez on 4 life, he appears to have both cards in hand, lands in play, he's got his Search for Azcanta. Has he turned a corner here?
Yeah, there's a little bit more to do here for Javier. Since Leo was missing land drops earlier, he has tons of spells to cast, and Javier only has 2 cards in hand, actually. Something like a Glory Beam this turn will just immediately finish the game, which makes this actually a lot closer. It's actually pretty close, I would say, but for every turn that Javier can survive in the coming turns, he will start to take over the game gradually with the help of Search for Azcanta in his hand and that Teferi that he can resolve next turn.
Yeah, strangely, the most pertinent thing that's going on for Javier, not necessarily that Torrential Gearhulk that's currently sitting unopposed, hitting in for 5 a turn, but the Search for Azcanta that means that it offers a certain sense of inevitability to what Dominguez is trying to achieve.
Right. And Javier has on a response to this Rekindling Phoenix in Teferi in his hand. We'll see if he wants to flip the Azcanta this turn as well. Seems like he found something pretty powerful, otherwise you wouldn't consider this even, because it's so much more important, because it's pretty good to flip that Search for Azcanta, but it seems like he wants to keep a Blink of an Eye. And Blink of an Eye is kind of nice here, because he only really needs time, especially with a Teferi on the battlefield. So, since Leo has so many cards in hand, it's all about the tempo here. So, bouncing the Rekindling Phoenix, even if it is for 2 mana, it's just almost as good as a removal spell. And now it's also out of range of any kind of Glory Bringers that would before kill him on the spot here.
So Torrential Gearhulk doing good work, dropping Leonarez to 10 here.
So Leo draws a land this turn. We'll see if he has a Glory Bringer and goes for it. But now Javier does have a response to that. So Yeah, I think Javier drawing that blink is now heavily ahead, actually.
And you could see what a big decision it was for him, because transforming that Search for Azcanta into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, also a very big play.
Especially since he could use it right away, even if he cast the Fury. And we all know that Azcanta and the Fury are pretty good together, but I think Blink is worth waiting a turn until you get your engine going.
So that Goblin Chainwhirler finishes off the hero of Dominaria. 1 point to Javier as well.
I think Leo has a cut to ribbons in his hand, interestingly enough. I'm surprised that he has this post board. It could be that he has too many cards to board out, and cut ribbons is kind of the worst or the best out of the bad cards, so to say. But together with something like Goblin Chainwhirler, it could potentially deal with something like Lyra Dawnbringer.
I mean, it does also put Javier Dominguez in a nominal check here, that he's got ribbons in the graveyard. He has 5 lands in play, so he can do a 3-point ribbons, which would close this game out. But each and every turn that Javier Dominguez is able to survive, he's got so much mana to work with. He's got that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. The likelihood of the ribbons resolving does not increase with each passing turn.
But it does increase with this the rest.
If
Leo also has a land, he could probably get lethal this turn. I think Javier should negate this, because the rest can just take that negate, and this way he doesn't get to reveal his hand. The only difference would be if he thinks that he will use all mana, and that Leo would take negate regardless of what happens. And there's a good chance that Leo does take the negate, considering he has that cut ribbons that is lethal in his graveyard. We'll see.
I mean, I guess that also resolving a removal spell on Torrential Gearhulk is another way that he can get through 3 damage, given that there's Goblin Chainwhirler.
True, but there's that blink of an eye that can always deal with any kind of attacking permanent or any non-land permanent at all on the battlefield. It's gonna be a tough choice for Leo. Even if it takes, say, Essence Scatter to resolve something, that could just be blinked end of turn. Javier gets to draw another card, and then he gets to use his Search for Azcanta. Ends up taking the blink. Interesting. Means that it probably has something that warrants the Essence Scatter. We'll see here. That means it's probably off the cut ribbons plan. I think he has Pia and Hazoret in hand, and he's choosing which one he would want Javier to Essence Scatter the most.
Yeah, I mean, this is Leo Linares with his red-black Chainwhirler deck, just trying to get Javier Dominguez a little bit low on spells. Mana is not something that he can really get in a big fight over anymore. Lots of good juicy targets, though, with this Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Goes for Syncopate. That the good catch-all answer to essentially anything that Leo Linares chooses to do in the next turn or two.
Right, and here we see Lyra Dawnbringer. The 1-2 punch with negate is just so powerful post-board against the red-black vehicles. Like, even though the red-black Chainwhirler deck keeps some answers to Lyra, it can't have too many, because then you have too many dead cards when your opponent doesn't draw Lyra. So if you have a negate up, that's usually enough to protect Lyra, and when Lyra is protected, she takes over the game very quickly, since she survives Chandra, Glorybringers, and she can tussle with anybody in combat pretty much.
And the lifelink certainly relevant also, because 3 life, that's a range where this red-black Chainwhirler deck, 1 spell can get there. Once we're talking about 8 life, though, you're getting kind of virtual card advantage there, as your opponent's probably going to need 2 or 3 cards to deal that amount of damage.
Yeah, as soon as Lyra attacks 1 time, it's not about burning your opponent out anymore. You kind of have to outgrind them, which is quite difficult when your opponent has Azcanta the Sunken Ruin in play.
Rekindling Phoenix coming down for Leo Linares here. That's going to be good enough to me to Syncopate.
Given that Leo only has one card in hand, Javier doesn't really have to respect the burn spell, because anything that would kill him would be land plus lightning strike. And because of that, I think he can use Syncopate the Stream, killing Phoenix. If he syncopates it too, he has lethal on the battlefield, meaning that Leo will have to jump block this turn to survive. And meaning that Syncopate did not only take out the Rekindling Phoenix, but also the Goblin Chain Whirler on the battlefield. Indirectly.
So these attacks forcing a block from Linares. The pre-combat activation of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin yielding no treasure whatsoever, but with Linares now on 5, 2 different creatures lethal on the other side of the battlefield, 8 damage to deal in order to sneak a win here. It's going to be very tough for Leo to win this game too.
Most definitely. I think Leo drew an Angrath, but it's probably as close as he could get to winning the game, but negate or not, that's just not going to be enough at this point.
All right, so Javier Dominguez, we raced through game 1. Game 2 we caught up and we got a chance to see that no matter which pace you're running the game at, this blue-white control deck, if you let it get to those later turns, it can really put a hurt, even on these red-black decks that going into the tournament were very much the deck with a target on its head.
For sure. If you have a very good plan against this red-black deck with blue-white post-sideboard, I think you have an edge in the matchup, for sure.
Well, we'll have more magic for you from this round soon enough. Do not go anywhere. More from Grand Prix Copenhagen after these messages.
So judges are here to make sure that you guys have the best possible event that you can. We help out with logistical things like putting up pairings, passing out slips, giving you product if you need product, and basically here to help you out with anything that you need. Answer any judge calls that you have, whether it be about the rules, the event, or just life in general. We're here to help you.
Hello and welcome back to live coverage of Grand Prix Copenhagen. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Joel Larsen, and we've had plenty of standard thus far, but we are very much in the red zone now, so this is the point where the players are really just looking toward making that final push towards top 8. And we're going to get a chance to head back down to our feature match area now and see another pair aiming to do exactly that. We've got Pascal Werkman on the left of our screen. He's at 9-2. Joachim Staller-Nielsen, though, one better, kicking things off with a Fanatical Firebrand, about the most aggressive start that you can have in this standard format. And Lamorels versus Fanatical Firebrand, that's a fight where I think I want to be on the red side of things.
Yeah, definitely. It's a classical Mog Fanatic versus Burst of Paradise. Right? And I think that seeing the Fanatical Firebrand that we haven't seen in such a long time probably means that Joachim is playing some very hyper-aggressive version of Monred, and that probably means he's playing ton of one-drops. I'm suspecting Firebrand, Bowman Courier, maybe even the 1-2 Wizard. That gets haste when there is two or more sources / incendiary sources in the graveyard alongside Wizard's Lightning. And maybe we can even see some Flame of Keld in the deck.
Flame of Keld was a kind of a niche deck at the Pro Tour. It's definitely got some potency to it, though. Karizev working very nicely with the Flame of Keld, but as things stand, Karizev and Bomat Courier working alongside Ragavan there to knock Pascal Werkman's life total down just a little bit, and the hits keep on coming as here comes Soulscar Mage from Staller-Nielsen. Yeah,
we can actually even see Wizard's Lightning in the hand of Joachim, so he probably runs the full 8 Wizard one drops, and it kind of works very well to create this pseudo lightning bolt. It's very powerful. And this, if you play Wizard's Lightning alongside Lightning Strike, that means you get a lot more burn to the face. That works very well with Flame of Keld, where you empty your hand, then you discard 1 or 0 cards, draw 2 cards, and hopefully you draw some burn spells that can help finish your opponent when the third mode of Flame of Keld comes around.
All right, well, here comes Steel Leaf Champion. That a big old roadblock for a lot of what Staller-Nielsen has going on right now, but at least he has that Soulscar Mage. The Soulscar Mage does mean that there's the potential that even if a single burn spell isn't going to be enough to kill off the Steel Leaf Champion, it can really shrink down the potential that it has to be problematic here in combat.
So what Joachim can do is he can shrink the Steel Leaf Champion with a Wizard's Lightning, for example, forcing Pascal to crew the Heart of Kiran, or he can just attack first. I think Joachim drew a shock, so I was thinking that maybe then you could shrink the Heart of Kiran in combat as well, making it unable to block any good targets. But I think Joachim is going to take a more aggressive route and use most of his burn spells to go for face instead, which works kind of well with the prowess from Soulscar Mage. We'll see if he just goes face with everything here and sacks the Bowman Courier. I think this is a kind of a valid plan. Okay, so instead he shrinks the Heart of Kiran.
Yeah, Heart of Kiran now a 1-1, trading off with Bowmat Courier as things stand.
I'm not sure I like this play. He could have dealt a lot of damage this turn. He could have dealt double prowess trigger plus 5 points of burn. That is 4, 6, 11 damage, and then you can sacrifice the Bowman Courier for 2 more cards, and you still have a board of Soulscar Mage and Karizev. I think I would have liked that a little bit better. Now I just think that Heart of Kiran, as awkward it is on defense and on the draw, got to trade for too many cards. But it still has that Earthshaker Kendra, kind of a surprise where you can force something to not be able to block, but it's going to be hard against the Steel Leaf Zombie deck because all the creatures have such a high power that usually you can just block anyways.
Adventurous Impulse there coming along for Pascal Werkman. This the other green 1-drop that we see in these green decks, less susceptible to copies of Goblin Chainwhirler, but at the same time it's not going to accelerate anything out.
Alright, so this is, I guess, a good target for the Earthshaker Kendra, so to say. I think there's only Servant of the Conduit and Lanowells that Earthshaker Kendra can make incapable of blocking. Alright, so there's another Bowman Courier. So I like casting Earthshaker Kendra here plus Bowman Courier and just attacking with everything, dealing tons of damage this turn. And then hopefully Joachim, for his own sake, can burn Pascal out after dealing tons of damage with his creatures.
Yeah, I mean, Steel Leaf Champion, it is a big creature. It is going to get to eat one of those attackers. But at the same time, Workman, even before this attack step on 9 life, Bomat Courier here coming down as well to get some attacks in.
Yeah, and I like this attack and play from Joachim. I think this was the correct play. Even though he, if Pascal blocks the highest power creature, it still takes a total of 5 damage, and with a shock in hand, that's only virtually 2 damage away from lethal. And with card 7 on the battlefield, that's just not too hard to assemble. And an extra card from Bowman Courier, and of course the top of his library. And also Joachim's still at 20 life, so there's so much time to kind of draw 2s out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that early doors Fanatical Firebrand is a great way of dealing with Alamor Elves, but when you're this close to finding lethal, sometimes just having the cheeky point on the top of your deck will be good enough.
Yeah, also Fanatical Firebrand working very well with Flame of Killed. I'm not sure that Joachim is playing Flame of Killed. I'll see if I can find his deck list here, maybe. Let's see. I'm just assuming so, given the amount of 1-drops we've seen here.
Yeah, Flame of Keld, much like Hazaret, at its best in a deck that's able to empty its hand relatively quickly so that one of the acts of that saga doesn't end up hurting too poorly. But
yep, 3 copies of Flame of Keld in the main deck.
All right, well, Thrashing Bronstone that's come down for Pascal Werkman, that will be a reasonable answer to it. And actually, looking at Werkman's board, he's beginning to assemble the quantity of creatures and indeed the quality to mean that blocking becomes realistic.
Indeed. Joachim still has 1 attacker that will get through, so he can for sure deal 1 damage this turn. If he has just 1 point of... Okay, so that's going to be enough. If he shocks face here, Gifted Levimancer or Shocking Servant works too.
Yeah.
Oh wait, does it actually work?
Deal with one of the creatures. So we have a 2-power Haster, a 2-power Soulscar Mage, a 2-power Ragavan, and then also this Menacing Karizev plus a Bomat Courier. Going to be difficult to block all of that, and that's enough for Joachim to pick up the game 1. We're going to get to jump straight into game 2, and it looks like Stella Nilsson here having to take a mulligan.
Yeah, as long as Shock deals the same amount of damage that the Servant would be blocking, this is the same amount of damage coming through, of course. All right.
Bomat Courier coming down. That's potentially a way of Stella Nilsson getting out of whatever mulligan he finds himself in here. Resilient Henry coming down for Pascal Werkman, so that'll be a little bit of at least a speed bump for this Bomat Courier.
Indeed. I think we see a Karizev's expertise in Joachim's hand, and I love this in this matchup because the Steel Leaf Stomp deck's game plan is usually just playing as many creatures early as possible that stay on defense, and the way they turn around the game is playing Galta. And when they play Galta, they just turn the corner very, very quickly, and fretting at a Galta is that's just something you dream about, right?
It's a dream that I have not yet realized, but one of these days it could well happen. Thrashing Bronstone coming down here. Bomat Courier and Soulscar Mage already on the battlefield for Stella Nilsson. There's a shock in hand. There is Gitu Lava Runner in there.
So this Soulscar Mage still has an attack on this battlefield. What you could do is that you could also cast this Gifu Lava Runner, shock the Thrashing Bronstone, so the Gifu Lava Runner has haste and attack with both. And that way Pascal clearly doesn't have to block, but he can get through for more damage this turn. But he should at least... Okay, so I don't like this attack a particular amount, because this way Pascal is pretty sure to block this Bowman Courier, which cannot be saved in combat here. Alright, so he's gonna... I think Joachim could have done this a lot later. So instead he could have gone for shocking the Thrashing Bronstone pre-combat, or just attacking with the Soulscar Mage and then shocking it upon Pascal blocking, getting rid of the Thrashing Bronstone. But this way, he has lost too many cards from his Bowman Courier, I believe.
Yeah, this has not been quite the same explosive start that we saw in Game 1. Obviously, on a mulligan, it gets a little bit trickier, but missing land drops. Yes, this red deck doesn't need loads of land to be able to get going, but where it gets really exciting is when it can cast multiple spells in a turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're completely right. Joachim runs tons of 1-drops, which is great for aggressive starts, but if your hand only has 1-drops, I mean, clearly those creatures are less powerful than, say, a 2-drop, so it's important that you're aggressive, but also that your cards are worth a certain amount of value. So, because otherwise, it's going to be hard to get through with the measly power of the 1-drops only in this matchup.
Still Leaf Champion and Thrashing Bronzestone doing a fine job here of dissuading any attacks from Joachim Stahl-Nielsen. Life total 17 to 20, and if you were looking for kind of the quick crib notes of where each deck wants to be by this stage in the game, ideally the red deck needs Workman to be a lot lower than 17 at this stage.
Indeed. And being on the draw, this is a difficult task because the green creatures are so good at blocking. I mean, we can see so much toughness on them, especially when Joachim is playing such a low to the ground red deck where it usually doesn't have cards like Chandra or Glorybringer to kind of tussle with the Steel Leaf Champions or Thrashing Brontodones, for that matter.
Now it feels to me like the consolation prize for this red deck right now, I mean, as Bomat Courier comes down but can't really get much going in terms of attacks, is that a Flame of Keld is actually a pretty exciting draw at this point for the red deck. At least it gives him a way of generating a bit of velocity and actually having a big turn where he can deal an amount of damage that's scary even for these larger green creatures.
Right. Yeah, you're completely right. Something like a Flame of Keld or like Joachim just needs a dramatic effect to turn this game around. Is he gonna? Okay. Pretty close to missing the Bowman Courier trigger there. And I'm kind of surprised by this attack with Soul Scar Mage.
Seems very optimistic that the card underneath that Bomat Courier is going to be one relevant to punish a block here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't understand this attack, in all honesty. Especially just throwing away your Soul Scar Mage if you don't draw anything. And if you do draw something, you have to point it at Thrashing Brontodon, which is not even your biggest concern at this point. Yeah, I think this Joachim kind of allowed Pascal to turn the corner a little bit too quickly here, and I think we're going to see this game being over very quickly.
Yeah,
and turn into a game 3.
Big set of attacks here from Workman. That Steel Leaf Champion not getting blocked by anything right now, and the other creatures kind of necessarily getting blocked here. That Fanatical Firebrand, at least a parting shot, will deal with Landmore Elves on Workman's side of the battlefield.
Right.
But this is not the plan that Joachim Stahl-Nielsen was hoping to enact in most of his games.
Yeah, I mean, Joachim can't really take it all because it's just too much damage, right? It's 9 damage coming across, and then Steel Leaf Champion starts to become a one-sided abyss. And if he's trading with Resilient Kenra, you have to kind of deal with that Lanner Elf, because otherwise it can eternalize if Pascal draws a land, meaning that you probably have to block both creatures and ping off the Lanner Elf if you're going to block it all, which you already probably have to at this point, but it's a losing scenario regardless of what you're doing there.
Yeah, the clause on Steel Leaf Champion about not being able to be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less at its absolute premium in this matchup. Really not too many high power creatures for the mono red deck. Early Bomat Courier here on game 3 though, on the play for Stahl-Nielsen, and by the looks of things I would say that this mono red deck in the field, one of the lists that is most keen to be on the play.
Yes, it's being on the play with this deck is definitely huge. Alright, so he does have another Bomat Courier. I was scared there for a second with his second land being Scavenging Grounds that he only had 2 red 1-drops to deploy next turn, but Bomat Courier definitely helps you smooth out the mana base of the mono red deck if you run a colorless lands, which is pretty funny. But being on the play is, as you said, enormous here, especially if Pascal does not have a Land of Elves.
So 7 at the conduit with 2 toughness a little bit fiddlier to deal with. Fanatical Firebrand in play on its own is not going to be enough. There's another one in hand, but trading 2 Fanatical Firebrands for Servant of the Conduit doesn't excite me greatly. A shock here, even a lightning strike, would allow quite a bit more damage to come through.
Right, and I think Joachim has another Fanatical Firebrand too, and we're getting into the territory where Bowmouth Courier looks like an unbeatable card. Where you go one drop, another Bowmouth Courier, and then you deal with all the blockers coming through. We're gonna look at Bowmouth Couriers drawing up to 10 cards together. It's just gets absurd when you're on the play and can curve out like this.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the kind of mono red deck that I would necessarily expect to have a lot of copies of Hazoret the Fervent. But even without Hazoret, Bowmouth Courier on its own really does reward you from being able to empty your hand fast, replacing with other creatures. A Resilient Kenra, another creature that is among the list of creatures that are reasonable to expect this red deck to be able to 1-for-1 remove.
Right. I think we're gonna see an attack with everything here, and Bowmouth Couriers getting more cards underneath them.
Yeah.
Where one of them will have to be stopped this turn, and before damage, Joachim will draw a new hand, basically. We'll see if he wants to sacrifice both Bowmouth Couriers or only the one being blocked. I think since he has 3 mana to work with here, I would just want to block with one of them, as you play so many 1-drops in Joachim's deck. It's pretty easy to deploy the 1-drops before you have to sacrifice the second Bowmouth Courier, getting the most value possible.
Yeah, so many different ways to empty your hand in this deck. Simply casting all your creatures, a very reasonable start on that.
And here Joachim has the option to cast an Earthshaker Kenra that he drew alongside his mountain, but saves it for if say to make Resilient Kenra not be able to block. Also, he keeps up mana for the Bowmouth Courier in case Pascal has some kind of way to deal with it. He would want to have access to those 4 cards underneath it. I think we can see a Nature's Wave in there. So, and also putting the Earthshaker Kenra in the graveyard, not too bad. Since drawing 4 cards, you can probably get up to 6 mana even in this low curve deck.
We often think of Steel Leaf Stompy as being one of the decks that can be faster than a lot of the other decks in the format, but right here on the draw against Mono Red Flame, it does feel like it's the slower one in the race here. Nature's Way will do a good bit of work here, forcing a decision for Stalin Nilsson as to whether or not he thinks the 2 cards he has left in hand are better than all of those cards on the other side of things.
I think we see Mountain, Shock, Wizard's Lightning, Shock. All right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's 7 damage. And alongside those 2 Fanatical Firebrands as lethal. That's just 9 points of damage during burn.
Nice to not have to worry about hitting the red zone with this red deck. Obviously, it's not a deck that's afraid of attacking, but if you don't have to, even better.
Yeah. So I think what they're trying to resolve with a judge here is that Nature's Way, it deals power from a creature to another creature, and then Pascal wants to attack with Vigilance, but since Bowmouth Courier was sacrificed in response, the spell fizzles and the creature will not get Vigilance. So there's resolving that, and we'll see if Joachim can find a winning play. And I think this finger means you're at 9, right?
Oh, anytime a red deck asks you what your life total is.
and ends the question with right question mark. Ooh, and it actually goes for Shock and Resilient Kenra.
So this leads to a Blossoming Defense.
Yeah, this would also be lethal, but it gives Pascal's options that he could have here.
Yeah, I kind of like sending a lot of burn to the head. We saw Joachim going for this similar line in game 1 of opting to try and keep the board more empty rather than just going to the head here, and he's kind of priced into playing another copy of Shock here. If there's another Blossoming Defense, this is a disaster for Joachim Stalin-Nilsson. As things stand, he does end up getting the 2 for 2, clearing a path.
Right, but he lost 2 damage here, given that Blossoming Defense quote-unquote countered one of them, meaning he will have lethal only next turn. But I have a hard time seeing Pascal having anything to say about it. Even I mean, his only play this turn is going to be a Virtus Geralt, hopefully turning the corner somehow, some way. But it's just not going to be enough at this point.
It's sad when the big old Virtus Gearhulk is too little too late. As things stand, it's not even Virtus Gearhulk there, just a Dino coming down. I mean, a 5/5 body for 4, nothing to be sniffed at, but at this stage in the game, that's not even what Starlin Nelson's worried about. He just needs to go straight to the head. First Wizard's Lightning, 2 Fanatical Firebrands. That'll do it, and he advances to 11-1. 11-1. Now we're really starting to think about top 8. It's not just about, I'm having a pretty good day yesterday, I'm having a pretty good day today. One loss with this few rounds to go. Exciting moment. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more magic, though, because we have our Game 3 from Tobias Mora, our one remaining undefeated player. He's on mono-red aggro. He's up against Lucas Blahon, who's on red-black Chainwhirler. So pretty close to what we saw for the Pro Tour finals just last weekend. There it went to mono-red aggro, the mono-red deck having a little bit more consistent draws maybe than the red-black list. We'll see how it plays out here, though, as we are going to our deciding game.
Yeah, we'll see if this Canyon Slew in Lucas' hand is going to punish him or not. I think since Tobias cast an Aethersphere Harvester this turn and Lucas having an Abrade, he will not get punished, and then I think we'll have an even game on our hands.
Yeah, the ideal is to find a turn where you can play that Canyon Slow either as a cycle without it really costing you anything in terms of time, or putting it into play as a land without the fact that it comes into play tapped really hurting too poorly.
Yeah, right. And Lucas, that drew an Infinite Deadlands this turn, has 5 lands in hand, and I think he reckons that he only needs 4 this game, and wants to play a little bit for the longer game, finding that edge, drawing more cards with the Canyon Slew, as the mono-red aggro list does not have access to these kind of cards.
Well, Abrade does deal with Aethersphere Harvester there. A few targets better in the mono-red deck than the otherwise pretty problematic flyer.
Right. And Lucas running on our mountain here, and is definitely his choice of not playing the Cannon Slew here. He's getting rewarded. And we'll see what he deploys here. He has the option of, I believe, Chandra, Rekindling Phoenix, and he also has Chandra's Defeat, I believe. And Lucas was considering whether he should Chandra's Defeat this Soulscar Mage at the end of Tobias' turn, but elects to save it because it's only real good removal against something like a Glorybringer. And just thinks that it's better to use Chandra as a removal instead, and hope that Tobias won't be able to have a haste creature that kills it, making Chandra 2-for-1 in this scenario.
Yeah, a haste creature or indeed a Goblin Chainwhirler would do the trick. As things stand, kicking things off with the Soulscar Mage, that one will not be sufficient to deal with Chandra, but a shock that will finish her off.
Yeah, also gives Lucas the 2-for-1, and this makes his Rekindling Phoenix in hand even better, since usually you need 2 removals against it, where there is not a ton of ways to exile a Rekindling Phoenix in a red list, if it doesn't run something like Punishing Blow, which I don't think he is.
Right, so Chandra's Defeat followed by Goblin Chainwhirler.
That's
the sequence that
good draw.
Tobias Mara needed, and we've sped things up just a little bit here because time has been called on our regular round. We want to make sure that we can get across to our next round in good time, and Glorybringer coming along.
Lucas has drawn a bunch of lands in a row, but it actually turned out pretty well for him here. Since he drew a Glorybringer, he can also leave out 1 mana for Chandra's Defeat, meaning that Tobias didn't have a window open to kind of get his own Glorybringer attack in there. And this is a pretty big game. Alright, so continues Chandra's Defeat here, back and forth.
Very powerful sideboard card. Obviously narrow because it's really all about punishing the red decks, but when the red decks represent such a large proportion of the room, a very solid choice. Goblin Chainwhirler coming down for Blahon, and he's got Chandra's Defeat for Glorybringer, meaning that right now he's the one with the biggest creature on the battlefield. He's also got these this copy of If Near Deadlands that at some point is a removal spell. He ultimately uses it on a Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, when So, the best card in this matchup is Hazoret, and Monred aggro is better at casting Hazoret, so it has edge in that way and doesn't have too many tap lands. But when there is no Hazorets in the match and the game goes a little bit longer, it gets the edge of having stuff like Infinite Deadlands and Canyon Slough. But Lucas does draw the Hazoret and finishes the game.
And that means that we have no undefeated players left in the room. Everyone that is left that is hoping for top 8 is at that 11-1 record. That means that we've got everything to play for in these final rounds. We are in the red zone at this point, so these players very much looking to top 8, and every one of our rounds from here on out will be about players that are trying to lock in that top 8 spot. No one's there yet, but it will not take very much more winning to make sure. Do not go anywhere. We'll have more Magic for you after these messages.